I feel like I need to put a stone in the bowl for my niece, Gabby, who just graduated from cosmetology school on Thursday and is 7 months pregnant and lives in a place where there is an awful lot of gun violence. My dear friend, Reverend Lucas, who serves our congregation in Deerfield, Illinois, was among the hundreds of clergy bearing witness to ICE activity in Chicago last week. Lucas is fine, but hundreds of them were shot at and pepper sprayed on Friday. More than 24 ministers were arrested, and among them were our UU colleague, Reverend Michael Wolf. I have so much gratitude for the risks they're taking on behalf of their neighbors. This stone is for all the joys and concerns that remain unspoken, and for those who, for many reasons, are disinclined to share. These final stones are for all the trans people in the United States whose lives have been cut short in the last year because of their gender identity. 21 people died by their own hand. 27 were killed, including 21 trans women, 3 trans men, and 3 non-binary individuals. Of those killed, of the 27 killed, 17 were Black and 3 were Latin. And so we remember this morning all of the masculine women and feminine men, the post-op and pre-op people seeking to make their outsides match their insides, the cross-dressers and the people too fabulous for one fashion department, the drag kings and drag queens, the genderqueer revolutionaries, and the quietly non-binary, those who were killed by others in hatred, and those who ended their own lives in desperation or isolation. May we remember our ancestors who lived a life they felt was never truly their own, taking with them to the grave a secret they thought they could never share. And those ancestors who have always been present, who lived the way they had to live, despite the risks. May we pay attention to the children and young adults among us struggling to come out, that we may value them here, now, among us. May we help stop more hearts from breaking. May it be so. As the
Trans Day of Remembrance makes me sad and angry because of the mistreatment so many trans folks endure. But it's also a time of joy for trans people who get to be their authentic selves and live in a way that feels right. 10 years ago, I learned that my niece was transitioning to male, and I was bewildered. I wanted him to be happy, but I just couldn't understand. I was afraid for him. I was afraid he would regret the decision, that his partner would leave him, that he would lose his graduate fellowship, that he would be attacked. He was the first trans person I knew of in our family, and I observed him closely. Was this a phase, as some suggested? Time passed, and it became clear that he was building a happier, healthier life and a satisfying career. He married his partner, and they now have 2 wonderful children. This was certainly not a phase. Although they've met with some discrimination, they would never go back. Their life is good. Other stories are not so positive. A couple of years ago, one of our teenage grandchildren told the family that though he was assigned female at birth, he is a boy. However, they live in Florida, where you don't say gay, much less openly admit to being trans. He was lonely and depressed in a world that judges him. ridicules him, or leaves him out. He's engaged in self-harm and is still struggling. My heart aches for him, and I hope that the help that he's getting will give him the support he needs to thrive. I grieve for the suffering that cruelty and ignorance cause many trans kids. Meanwhile, we have more trans folks in our extended family. They're the same people inside as before they transitioned, but happier and more comfortable. I'm still struggling with using their correct pronouns. I know that using their correct pronouns makes them feel seen and respected. I still make mistakes. But as my non-binary, genderqueer adult kid, Eli, assures me, I just need to keep trying. What feels disrespectful, they said, is not trying, giving up on learning how to respect these loved ones and show it with my words. Knowing these family folks, I realize I still have a lot to unlearn, especially my assumptions regarding gender. Ever since the early feminists, many people have acknowledged that our stereotypes of what is masculine and feminine are often distorted. Now I'm learning how harmful those stereotypes can be. Trans folks free themselves from these rigid expectations. They're freeing me. But sometimes, because of their freedom from societal norms, I fear for them and their friends, because people who feel threatened by their independence might hurt them. But mainly I celebrate them and I love them. Their joy in being their authentic selves brings me joy. They live and work and play as they truly are. They're artists and financial directors, theater makers, teachers, and social workers. They're singles, couples, parents. I'm awed by their creativity and their hard work and their compassion. They're a community helping each other and courageously defending the rights of all trans folks. They're special, they're strong, and they're resilient. What can we do, those of us who want to support trans folks during this scary time when they're being aggressively targeted? 1, pay attention to local elections for school board and town council. Ask candidates directly about their commitments to supporting the inclusion of all students in schools and libraries, including trans, Black, brown, and disabled. 2, if your favorite restaurant or bar has restrooms that are labeled men's or women's, ask the management respectfully to label them simply restroom to make all of their customers comfortable. Number 3, get a Progress Pride flag and hang it at your house, your business, everywhere. The Progress Pride flag has a triangle for trans people on top of the gay pride stripes. Eli has stressed to me that trans and queer people feel more safe and feel less at risk when flags are widely visible. And 4, when meeting people, practice asking them what pronouns they use and sharing your own. Trans people are less than 2% of the population. They need our active support. I hope we can give it.
So since the annual Transgender Day of Remembrance is Thursday, I also wanted to talk a little bit about being an ally. Now you might ask, why not have someone who boldly proclaims a trans identity to come up and share their experience? Well, the thing is, we can't keep expecting people who are at risk to keep teaching us, because to varying degrees, we're all kind of slow to learn. We need to keep teaching each other how to be allies. It's a confusing topic for a lot of folks, so I want to briefly explain what transgender means. When each of us is born, someone, like a doctor, a nurse, or a doula, looks between our legs and determines whether we are male or female based on our visible plumbing. And if that sex hasn't already been revealed about us when we were still a fetus. Now, for 98% of us, that assignment is comfortable, at least reasonably comfortable. It may not be perfect, but it's good enough to live with. And for many, many, many people, it feels spot on, exactly right. And there's a bit of wiggle room, right? You can play with your hairstyle, short or long. You can play with your clothes, colors, prints, patterns, shoes. We can be men who are expressive or nurturing. We can be women who are stoic or ambitious. And we can live within that wiggle room and most of the time feel reasonably safe. But as Penny said, it depends on context. I know in Seattle or Providence, I'm usually tolerated the way that I am and often appreciated as being delightfully kooky. But in the prison town where I grew up, I push the boundaries way too far. Everywhere I go when I am there, someone gives me a look that makes me feel like I'm about to get beat up. And maybe I deserve it. Maybe I'm not so neatly at the male end, so perfectly, right? Maybe I'm part of that 2% in between, that other 2%, where there is this whole universe, a continuum of gender expressions and experiences. There's the trans folks, the ones who, like transgender, like, you know, the ones who aren't at all comfortable with the sex that they were assigned at birth and decide to go to the other side, to do whatever they need to take, whatever moves they have to make, drugs, surgery, everything, to live fully as the other gender. And the time of active transitioning can be really awkward. My friend Jay, who is a bald, bearded trans man, talks about how scary it was for him while he was transitioning. Every day on the train to work, people would threaten him. They would call him a fag. There's so much there to unpack, I can't even begin to go there. The thing is that bystanders and passersby often wonder, boy or girl? Because we all tend to think, whether we like it or not, that you're supposed to be one or the other. That's what we've been taught since our plumbing was revealed to the world on our behalf when we arrived. So being something else makes a lot of folks very uncomfortable, sometimes very, very uncomfortable, violently uncomfortable. Alok Vaid-Menon is a gorgeous, fabulous, part-time model and full-time writer and performance artist. A trans feminine person who was assigned male at birth, who breaks all the gender norms. They're brilliant, funny, outspoken, sensitive, aggressive, and a master of poignancy, achieving that feeling of laughter through tears. They usually use only one name, Alok. In their 2020 book called Beyond the Gender Binary, Alok wrote, some gender non-conforming people are non-binary, and some are men and some are women. It depends on each person's experience. Two people can look similar and be completely different genders. Gender is not what people look like to other people. It is what we know ourselves to be. No one else should be able to tell you who you are. That's for you to decide. In other words, as my friend Matt, a man who gave birth while transitioning, always says, sex is between your legs, gender is between your ears, and nobody has the right to ask you what you have or tell you who you are. Alok has observed many times that the 98% of us on either end of the spectrum, the folks who are at least reasonably comfortable. What did I write here? Alok has observed that many times the 98% of us on either end of the spectrum tend to be comfortable with the trans folks in between when they're a bit removed from reality. right? We tend to be more comfortable with characters that are on the page, stage, or screen. Like Virginia Woolf's 100-year-old novel, Orlando, in which the title character's gender changes through the decades, so that they're never quite fully one or the other. On TV and in the movies from the 50s and 80s, gender bending was everywhere. Remember Uncle Milty? In black and white, he was in a dress every week. There was Some Like It Hot, and Bosom Buddies, and Tootsie, and La Cage aux Folles, Rent, Kinky Boots. These were all huge hits that were everywhere in their time. On the page, stage, and screen, as characters in a story, people loved them because they were safe from challenging our understanding of reality, our understanding of our own gender. They don't even really have to be fictional characters. Singer Harry Styles and actor Pedro Pascal can get away with pushing more boundaries than most people. They can wear a blousey top or pearls and nail polish, maybe even high heels, and get away with it without too much harassment. Partly because they live in the rarefied world of the rich and famous, but mostly because they're both attractive, white, straight, able-bodied men. Their bodies are traditionally masculine. But for folks like Alok, who aren't so well known and don't have the popular idealized white bodies, and whose style has pushed the boundaries so far that, boy, they've left the state, it's a whole different journey. Over the years, Alok has talked about when gender nonconformity is combined with another less desirable identity. If your presentation is feminine and your body is traditionally masculine, or if you're trans and of any color other than white, you're too loud, they'll tell you. You're too thick, you're too brown, you're too hairy. It's a lot to navigate, being genuinely yourself in a world that wants you to be what they want you to be. If you've never experienced gender transition, if you have never presented as a gender different from your own, if you have never exposed your own gender beyond the binary, can you imagine how exhausting it is to have to navigate everyone else's responses day after day after day? It can be lonely and scary. Sometimes very lonely and very scary. You know, I wish I could have read the names of the dead at the end of our joys and concerns. I wish there was some place where I could find all of the names of the victims, the way I can find all of the names of the victims of mass shootings. But the sad fact is that too many deaths are covered up, ignored, or reported in ways that erase the gender presentation of victims. Judging by all the anecdotes in the trans community and the public records that are available, one thing is absolutely clear. A disproportionate amount of people killed are trans women of color. Femininity and color. And like Alok has said, some people can take a little bit of difference, but not too much. And the people who are in between, non-binary or actively transitioning, are the biggest targets, the most obvious threats to the binary status quo. It's a lot to carry around every day for someone like Alok, who is loud and thick and brown and hairy, in fabulous frilly clothes and heels. It's amazing that they can remain funny and compassionate. Interestingly, their resilience has a lot to do with their aunt, Urvashi Vaid. Urvashi Vaid was one of my activist heroes in the late 80s when I was an angry, baby gay, budding activist. She was the executive director of the National GLBTQ Task Force from 1989 to 1982, a fighter who took on George Bush publicly, interrupting him repeatedly for not funding HIV and AIDS. She was one of the first people I heard talk about intersectionality long before I ever heard that word. She thought gay men and lesbians of all orientations and identities should be working together for equality, access to healthcare, and reproductive freedom, because all of the struggles were related. She was constantly asking white queer people to see the struggle through the lens of people of color. And she was one of the few people who could see Alok as a child for exactly who Alok was. Urvashi celebrated Alok, showering them with praise and love and attention, affirmation, modeling that we can all seize our own power, make a place for ourselves, fight like hell for what's right and good, and still be kind. Alok affirms repeatedly that they grew up to be so well-adjusted and confident, largely because of Aunt Urvashi, who encouraged Alok to be uniquely Alok. Penny had great suggestions for supporting trans people. Vote like the lives of trans people depend on it, because they do. Ask for, even demand gender-neutral restrooms in public spaces, and support people when they get hassled just for answering the call of nature. Get a progress flag and fly it. Share your own pronouns, even when it seems obvious, and respect other people's pronouns. That goes without saying. Yes, 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 and yes. And in a world where you can be anything, be like Aunt Urvashi. Be like Aunt Penny. Support genderqueer kids when they show themselves to be something other than the pink or blue babies all those gender reveal parties told them they should be. Stay with them. Lift them up for the light. Stay by them when they confound the rest of the world. If they transition, be there. If they turn themselves into some special creation, the likes of which you have never seen before, applaud them. Use the names and pronouns they request. Sacrifice whatever you have to keep them safe and loved. Be somebody's Aunt Urvashi, somebody's Aunt Penny, whatever your gender. You don't have to go up to people you don't know just to cheer them on. You don't have to be weird, but be kind. Smile, nod, move quietly closer when negative energy is getting directed at somebody. Fight with them when you have to. Maybe if we can all do this a little better someday, we won't have to acknowledge their deaths once a year. And maybe we of all genders might just learn a little bit more about ourselves for the better. Please rise now in body or in spirit to sing together what I think is the most beloved song